What's up, everybody? It is the one and only KidSmoove. This is another Apples and Oranges video, and today we are ranking Tupac albums. Got a tier list chart behind me, and we're gonna talk about where Tupac albums rank. Now, just to give you a heads up, the albums I will not be including will be like the albums like new classic mixes, the Tupac live albums, Live at the House of Blues, stuff like that. We're not gonna be doing the Rose That Grew from Concrete or anything like that. I'm talking about straight studio albums. There will be at least one compilation album and whatnot, but let's get into it. Let's get into the show. I hope you guys enjoy what we're going to discuss. Let me know in the comment section if you agree or disagree, and I want to know why. We all know I personally consider Tupac the greatest rapper of all time, and that's because, you know, his body of work, the content of his songs, and the time he managed to put all this out in such his short time on Earth. And he was only alive to put out, like, 5 albums or so, recorded about like 15 albums worth, but we're gonna rank them all, and then we're gonna start with the debut, and that is Tupacalypse Now. Now, as you can see, I have Tupacalypse Now rated as a D. It was Tupac's first album, his debut. Now, there's only a handful of artists whose debut album was a classic out of the gate. You consider, the Nas's, maybe even Biggie's and 50 Cent. Tupac, even though I consider him the greatest of all time, his first album wasn't that dope compared to other debuts. Now, as far as the album itself, it was good given for the time that it came out. I feel like it was a little bit ahead of its time. I feel like the production was trash, and I feel like the beats were whack, but the message and the content of what was there in Tupac's flow, because Tupac was hungry here. He was a hungry dude here. Actually, he was kind of hungry throughout his whole career. He came, he came hard, and he had a nice balance of just like showing off skill and being like educated, and it was all on full display. I feel like some of my favorite songs outside of the single If My Homies Call is my favorite song, Words of Wisdom, Rebel of the Underground, Cricket Ass Niggas, Brenda's Got a Baby, Trapped. I feel like those are all dope songs. This album unfortunately failed to have a chart chopping single, or even a top 40 single. So this album didn't spawn any like commercial hits. Came out late 91, November 91, just before the movie Juice came out. It was a young Pac. It was okay, but this is not an album that you can pick up and that. Let me say that again. It's not a album you would pick up and listen to, and vibe to. But the crazy thing is, now in 2019, given all the social stuff, all the injustice stuff that's going on, you listen to this album now, you actually would be like kind of surprised. That's like, oh, because it was relatable then, and it's even more relatable now. So I do recommend you listen to it if you haven't listened to it. But is it a classic Tupac album? No, it's classic as an age, but it's not classic as in a studio album, like being like any good or not. But I like it. But it's not Tupac's best works. He has far better works than this. But if you want to know where young Pac was at, and like what sparked, like, his interviews, the content of his interviews and stuff like that, listen to Tupacalypse Now, because it kind of gives you the brains and the smarts of Tupac. Tupac's second effort was Strictly For My Niggas. Came out February of 93. Spawned hits like Holly If You Hear Me, I Get Around, Keep Your Head Up, Papa Songs. This album was good. It was a good follow-up. Tupac's a little bit more mature. He sounds a little bit different, sounds a little bit harder, sounds a little bit rough. He's now he solved the problem with the first album, and that's coming out with a radio friendly hit. So he gets I Get Arounds. He gets to Keep Your Head Up. The problem with this, I think the only issue with this, when it came out February of '93. His first single was Holler If You Hear Me, and that shouldn't have been his first single because it didn't do so well, it didn't chart so well. It was a good song, and it became appreciated a little bit later, like in like 94, 95, it was a little bit more appreciated. But that was his first single because he promised Stretch, like, Stretch was his good friend. He produced that track for him. He said, that's gonna be his lead single of his first album, off his next album. And then it didn't do so well, but by the time I Get Around came out, which was a dope song, it was radio friendly, it charted very well. Also came out around the same time as Poetic Justice was out, which kind of put Tupac back on the big screen. So at this point, Tupac's really popular at this point, so that also helped. And I Get Around was like one of the songs of the summer of that year, and then he followed that up with Keep Your Head Up, which was just like, whoa. But overall, the album, Strictly for My N.I.G.G.A.Z, there's a lot of songs. I like it better than Tupacalypse Now. I know my dude Art of Dialogue, he thinks Tupacalypse Now is a better album, but I feel like from a production standpoint, it was a little bit better. He had a little bit better beats. For the time, 93, it was dope. My favorite songs were Represent in 93, Keep Your Head Up, I Get Around, Five Deadly Venom, Last Words. But outside of that, a lot of it was just like, whatever. I mean, there were some songs, but there wasn't really enough there. The beats weren't that hot. And like I said, it was still, for its time, I guess it was okay. But there was better production out there. There were better beats out around that time. The beats on this album were not good. There was only really 5 standouts that I could pull from that I enjoyed, that I could listen to. But overall, Strictly for My Niggas was an okay album. Had it not been because of those singles though, the I Get Arounds and Keep Your Head Up, it definitely surpassed Tupacalypse Now. It became a better album because they had from jump. It's like for what I felt about Brenda's Got a Baby, I felt that much about Keep Your Head Up, but several times over because I got to hear it more often. You got to see it more often. And then of course, If My Homies Call, and then from the first album, like what I felt about that song, I thought I Get Around was just like awesome. So so did The World. So I feel like overall, Tupac, Strictly for My Niggas produced better songs than Tupacalypse Now, and overall it was a better album, but not by much. Now, Tupac's third effort. Now 94 was a strange year because I feel like 93 and 94 in terms of recording music, Tupac recorded some of his best music. A lot of that stuff did not make it on an album that would release in 94. What we did get in 94 is the Thug Life album. Tupac was pushing Thug Life. This album was actually supposed to come in 93. Multiple delays. It was supposed to feature Biggie. It didn't happen, even though they got songs recorded. This is not really a favorite album of mine. I have it graded with Strictly for My Niggas because the production was dope. At that time, and I feel like the content that Tupac was putting out was like dope overall. So I think overall, in that time that he was recording Thug Life, Tupac just had better material. So judging Thug Life for what it is, I feel like I know there was a lot more recorded for this album, and thanks to the likes of like the Jive and Priority Records, maybe Interscope, a lot of these songs were cut. So the songs that were left on Thug Life were not like really that great. I mean, the songs that were, great, the Bury Me a G was a dope. How Long Will They Mourn Me is a classic. Pour Out a Little Liquor, it's also another classic. Straight Ballin' was a good song. Everything else, however, was so. I'm not a big fan of the Thug Life crew, the people that were rapping. I know, God rest his soul, Big Psych, God rest, Tupac and everything. Overall, I mean, that core wasn't the greatest. That group that Tupac was running with. Out of all the groups, the Digital Underground, the Thug Life, Outlaws are by far the best. But This album was okay. The production was better than Strictly for My Niggas. The singles were dope, but they, once again, they weren't commercially successful. And this is probably because all the legal trouble that Tupac was going through at this time, all the delays. The thing about this was that, you know, kept relevancy and that kept music flowing is because some of the songs were able to, you know, push a cipher through the Above the Rim soundtrack, cipher through like Tupac, you know, having notoriety after coming off of Poetic Justice, coming off of Above the Rim. I mean, they had singles there, but they weren't like chart toppers. They weren't like all over the radio or anything like that. It was just like, you know, okay. But as a fan, I loved the music. I thought it was dope, but it wasn't, you know, Tupac's best effort. Despite the time that he recorded this was like his best music being recorded at the time. However, this Thug Life released September '94. Shortly after, 6 months later, Tupac releases Me Against the World. And unfortunately, you know, Tupac, I think, was sent to prison in like February of '95. This album was just dope. It's a classic. It's just, I feel like Tupac has at least three classic albums in his catalog. Like 3 classic albums. Me Against the World don't usually get the notoriety or get the credit for being a classic album, but this was, at this time, this was Tupac's best work by far up until this point. You know, he had the singles, and then the album itself it wasn't just filler. It was all like significant hits, significant songs, moments. You had your Dear Mamas, So Many Tears, Temptations, Me Against the World, If I Die Tonight, Death Around the Corner, Old School. Like, Tupac had a pick of the litter of what he could have done for singles. The only unfortunate part about Me Against the World is that Tupac wasn't like free. He wasn't out of jail. If Tupac wasn't in prison when this album came out, I can imagine what the videos would have looked like. I can imagine the singles, the awards he would have won. This was a money-making machine had he would have been able to go on tour. But all this classic album did, this classic album that we're seeing from Tupac, this classic album, all it did was pay for his legal fees. You know what I mean? That's all it did. Because he was getting sued all over the place. He had, you know, he was in prison. So what it did was cover his bills and legal fees. So he didn't really reap the benefits of this album, and I think that's probably why he didn't appreciate it as much as he did. But and I know he understands it was some of his best work because he didn't really get to benefit off of it. But this is probably one of the best Tupac albums. Like, if you haven't heard Me Against the World in its entirety, I'm pretty sure you guys heard songs from it. You heard the Dear Mamas, you heard the Me Against the World song, but if we hear, you know, all the other tracks that in this album, like the It Ain't Easy and all this other stuff, Outlaw, Lord Knows, you're missing out. Tupac's Me Against the World, like I said, it came out, you know, 6 months after Thug Life. It was one of Tupac's first albums, first releases to go platinum almost immediately. It spent like 4 or 5 weeks on the charts at #1. It was just a dope effort, and like I said earlier, some of his best music was recorded between the years of '93 and '94, and this was full of songs that were recorded during that time, you know, during all the trials and tribulations. The crazy thing is, all the songs were recorded before he got shot at Quad Studios and before he getting arrested, before the verdict is out on his rape case. So to hear the content, it comes out now. Of course, it came out after all this stuff happened, but the content that was recorded prior to that, you're like, holy crap, this dude a prophet. And that's where, if you want to know the whole prophet thing, or why they say Tupac was like, you know, knew he was gonna die, or he was like prophetic lyrics, it was Me Against the World. The contents of Me Against the World versus what happened. You got to think about it. The album was recorded before all the stuff happened, like that, you know, end up sending him to jail and all this other stuff. And for it to come out at the same time as everything happened, it was just kind of spooky. But this is a dope overall album. It was a different form of Tupac we haven't heard before. It was, the growth was there, the content was there, the production was there, the singles was there. It was just a whole package. Definitely one of my favorite Tupac albums of all time. Now, the next album that we're going to talk about is the follow-up, and it was less than a year, 11 months later, Tupac comes out of prison, I want to say it was 6-7 months after this, releases his first album with Death Row, All Eyez on Me. I don't care what nobody says. This hip hop's first double LP. It had like 24 to 26 songs on it. This was a celebration of life. It was raw. It was commercially successful. It had singles. The beats were like different. We never really heard Tupac like on production is great up until this point. It was completely opposite of what Me Against the World was, but it wasn't bad, and I enjoyed almost every song. I mean, there's like 2 songs from each disc. There's like 1 song from each disc that I didn't care for, and that's saying a lot when you could put out like 26 songs on an album. But he had another album where he had a bunch of songs that he could have picked from that could have just been singles. Obviously, it ended up being California Love, How Do You Want It, 2 of America's Most Wanted, and I Ain't Mad At Ya. But it also had hits like Only God Can Judge Me, Picture Me Rolling, Life, Life Goes On, I'd Rather Be a Nigga, Thug Passion. It was just so much content, so much good quality content. It was like, it's my favorite Tupac album. I know a lot of people like to downplay it because a lot of people like to make fun of like fake or new Tupac fans because they point to Tupac's Death Row days. But this is what, to be fair, with some of Tupac's best work. Now, I appreciate Me Against the World as one of Tupac's greatest albums, but I don't downplay All Eyez on Me. It was one of the best albums of '96, if not the best. I know a lot of people want to credit, Nas's It Was Written or Fuji's The Score or Busta Rhymes album. What else came out that year? But at the end of the day, hands down, you look back at it, I'm like, nah. All Eyez on Me was probably was easily the best album to me. There was a lot of albums that came out that year, a lot of dope music, but I feel like All Eyez on Me really did his thing. It was one of the best releases that year, and I still listen to it to this day. Timeless music. Does not say, none of the songs on there sound old or aged. You know what I mean? I can't say the same for the albums that are ranked in a C and a D tier. All right, and unfortunately, it's crazy thing is that all the work that was done on All Eyez on Me, all the singles, all the videos that were made, that they were able to squeeze another album out that year, and that was Machiavelli. Now, this album, all right, there was a lot of material recorded for this album in this matter of a week, right? Due to his death, and he made peace with Nas and all this other stuff that was going on. A lot of the songs were cut. I feel like some of the songs they should have kept, because if you hear like the original 18 songs they had planned particularly for this album immediately goes in the S tier for me. However, unfortunately, for a reason why it's not an S tier album to me is feel like it's not the music itself. I feel like the content was dope. It was Tupac in rare form. Tupac lyrically upgraded. This is like some of the rawest, purest you're getting from Tupac. It was the engineering and the production that made this album a little less than what All Eyez on Me and Me Against the World. There was a lot of errors that they kept, whether it was Tupac ad-libs, the doubling of Tupac's voice. There was musical errors that they did not fix, and it was surprising for like a release like this. You don't catch those nowadays. If somebody releases an album with errors, they can come back, edit it, and update it, and it replaces it on Apple Music and whatnot. But this, if you have this album, or if you listen to some of the songs like White Man's World and Life of an Outlaw, you can hear some of the errors. But this album has my favorite song of all time, To Live and Die in LA. It has Hail Mary, Against All Odds, underrated song, Bomb First. It was just a great piece of work, and I point to this album as the album that really spawned the Tupac wannabes. This album kind of ushered in the post Tupac era, you know, like the Ja Rules, the DMXs, even some of Nas's follow-up work. A lot of those rappers trying to sound hard. This was the Tupac they were imitating. They were imitating the Machiavelli Tupac, the bandanas, the hard, the going after everyone, just the raw, the raspiness and everybody. I feel like DMX's Hell Is Hot, his first album, I felt like it was literally Hail Mary more times how many songs he had on that album. Think about it, for real though. Think about it. Like, Machiavelli is one of the greatest albums. It's a classic in my book. However, it can still be a classic, but not be better than Me Against the World and All Eyes on Me. Production wise, engineering, music wise, it was a rough album. They should have cleaned it up more, and they didn't. So that's why I rank it A versus an S tier. Now, the sixth album, I want to say what happened in '97. Now, '97 was pretty what did we have? His next album should have been Are You Still Down? Now, this one, the importance of this one, '97 was going to be a great year for both parties. Tupac and Biggie, had they, you know, lived to see the whole year out. Obviously, Tupac would have been off the cusp of doing the Machiavelli. You know, he's appearing on Bone Thugs. Got the song with Scarface. Got two movies. Had two movies out this year. I mean, '97, and he would have released, I think, the Outlaws album and the One Nation Project that year as well. But obviously, it didn't happen. And Biggie, obviously, you know, he had some hits. He had something ready for '97. He ended up dropping a classic album and stuff like that. So, and then it would have been a sight to see both labels at the height and like being able to have stuff ready at the same time. How would have Tupac reacted to like A Life After Death and all this other stuff, or how Biggie and all of them would have reacted to a Machiavelli album with everybody still alive? You know what I mean? It's crazy. But '97, what happened? Tupac had singles all over the place because he had tracks from like the Gridlock soundtrack, the gang-related soundtrack. He had the single with Bone Thugs and Harmony, Thug Love. He had the single with Scarface, Smile, that was like kind of floating around. And then, you know, they managed to release Are You Still Down, which honestly was the Thug Style album that was supposed to come out in '94 but never did. This album was another double LP. It was recorded between the years of '92 and '94. Majority of the work being like '93, '94. It spawned songs like Do For Love, I Wonder If Heaven Got a Ghetto, When I Get Free, what else? Nothing to Lose, Hold On, Be Strong, Hellraiser. There was a lot of this. I enjoyed this album a lot. To me it's a B. Like I said, it wasn't better than Me Against the World. Like I said, I feel like we missed out on this in &94. However, he did end up putting out a better album at that point, which was Me Against the World. So it's a couple notches lower than Me Against the World, but it is a dope album. If you haven't listened to it, it's one of my favorite albums. It stays in rotation. A lot of the songs, you know, are shuffled when I listen to my Apple Music playlist. This came out in November '97. And it was a dope album. It was earlier work from Tupac, so it wasn't like the stuff that he was recording in '96 or anything like that. But the only thing is, I don't really see any flaws from it. It's just that at that point, some of the songs did sound outdated at that point for what it did come out. But there was a lot of stuff that carried this album. It ended up going like, you know, I think 4 times platinum or more, like most of the albums that came out. Now in '98, we get Tupac's Greatest Hits. Now, I know I said I'm not counting all the other compilation albums. Reason why I count Greatest Hits is because Greatest Hits spawned like 3 or 4 singles, and it had like 6 songs that didn't appear on any other album, like we never heard before. The crazy thing, they could have added more like that we did hear, but it wasn't released on another album. So you had Troublesome 96, Unconditional Love, love the song, love the video. Changes, one of the greatest songs of all time. You had the All About You remix featuring Top Dog, love the video. You have God Bless the Dead, which is like a rare song. And of course it features all like Tupac hits from all of his albums prior. I felt like they should have added songs like Pain from the Above the Rim soundtrack, which it never made it to the soundtrack, but it was available in the movie. One of Tupac's greatest songs recorded. I'm Getting Money end up appearing on Out on Bell. Those end up appearing on later albums, but these were songs that were supposed to headline that year, but didn't. But Greatest Hits is an S tier album. Actually, it's an S plus tier album. It's the best compilation of songs. The Greatest Hits is up there with the likes of, when you talk about Greatest Hits is up there with the likes of like Michael Jackson's Greatest Hits, or the James Brown's Greatest Hits, the Marvin Gaye's Greatest Hits. This is the best hip hop Greatest Hits album ever to date. It's probably the only hip hop Greatest Hits album to go diamond. And of course, All Eyez on Me is also an album that went diamond. So I detect no flaws, no lies, and Tupac's Greatest Hits. It was a dope album. If you don't got any of Tupac's albums, you should have the Greatest Hits, and that's just facts. That is just facts right there. Now, oops, my bad, guys. Here we go. We have Still I Rise. Now, this was the Tupac and Outlawz. Came out in '99. Reason why I ranked this album high, it's a B. It's not the greatest Tupac album, but it's the greatest Outlawz album. I feel like this album, as is, with a few tweaks, would have still came out with Tupac here. It just would have came out a couple years earlier, and it would have featured Hussein Fatal. And that's my only knock on it, is that they removed Fatal, and I like, even though as much as I love the song Still I Rise, I wish they kept some way kept the original version. It had a better beat. It just sounded better, and I think it would have made a stronger case. But overall, the work on his album is dope. For the most part, outside of Hussein Fatal and a few tracks here and there, most of the songs are true to a form and like being original to its original core. My favorite songs on this is Baby Don't Cry, Keep Your Head Up, Teardrops and Closed Caskets, The Good Die Young, Killuminati, Still I Rise, of course. It's a lot of cuts on here I did enjoy. It was recorded during that time, that 95, 96, and it's full of songs. This is some of the Outlaw's best work as well. So it's a rare album. A lot of people haven't heard it. Went double platinum, I suppose, but B tier. I think it's a B tier album. I feel like in the 95, 96 era, or the Machiavelli period, there's like obviously All Eyez on Me A tier, Machiavelli. All Eyez on Me S tier, Machiavelli A tier. The Tupac and Outlawz. This album itself, I consider B tier. It's great. It's awesome. I don't consider it a classic. After that was The Rose That Grew From Concrete. I'm not counting that. That's a poetry album. I got the book. I think it's dope. Until the End of Time came out in 2001. Now, this album was so. Like, to me, it sounded like an album that would come out in 2001 when you consider the beats. It sounded like honestly a Ja Rule album with vocals by Tupac. You know what I mean? That's how I felt about it. It had a little Mo. I think I liked it more back then. Like I love the song Until the End of Time and Ballad of a Dead Soldier and all that other stuff. They had I like A Letter to My Unborn Child, Letter to My Firstborn, Words to My Firstborn. I mean, I enjoyed those songs, like in the contents of them. But the thing, the crazy thing is that if had I not heard the original versions, like this album might be ranked a little bit higher. But because I heard the original versions, the album becomes so. And in terms of albums recorded during that time period, Tupac, like I said, 93, 94, and 95, 96 was some of the best Tupac recordings. This album would have been dope in its originality, but it's not the best of the albums that came out after Tupac's death. And I think that title honestly belongs to Better Days. Better Days is it exceeded my expectations. The only knock I have against it is that I wasn't a big fan of the Tupac Nas collaboration. I felt they could have done like a different song or used a different vocals for that. Cause I do like the original Thug Mansions. I do like the song Better Days with that Rhino Eyez sample. Oh, it's dope. I love My Block Nitty remix. A lot of people like the original My Block that appeared on the show in '95. But this is as good as a redo or as good as a remix you can ever get. It's To Live and Die in LA and then My Block Nitty remix are like my favorite, almost my favorite Tupac songs like ever. I listened to this song. I listened to this song on repeat. I used to have a CD player above my bed. I would just hit repeat on this song and go to sleep, wake up to it. I know the words like by heart. By now, it's my favorite song. But Better Days was just, I enjoyed that album. It was another double LP effort. The production was better. Like I said, I wasn't a big fan of some of the collaborations, the Nas's, the Trick Daddies, and stuff like that. But overall, like the contents, the song Still Ballin', and I know Trick Daddy was on that, but it was dope. It was a better album than Until the End of Time, for sure. It was a much better album than Until the End of Time. It sounded right. It was an album that I respected and I enjoyed, and it unfortunately was the last great Tupac album and his that we would get till then, you know. The next album, Slower to the Game. I gave this album an F. And the crazy thing about this is, right, if you hear the original version, which you can find on the internet, I would literally put the original version at a B. It would be a B or an A. Because, like I said, some of the songs that are on here, the original versions of these songs are like some of the best songs Tupac recorded. However, these songs, obviously, you know, they didn't really see the light of day. Some of them, you know, we heard him like, you know, perform like the Out on Bells and stuff like that. I would say what Eminem did, reason why Eminem was able to produce this album is because he did a decent job with the Tupac Resurrection soundtrack. You know, he gave us a tease of what he can do. Like Run and Die and Live is a dope song. The production was great. I like the, you know, the mashup with Pac and Biggie. One Day at a Time was a dope song. So he earned the respect and the trust from the Tupac estate to do the follow-up, which would be Loyal to the Game. Loyal to the Game was, you know, all Eminem, fully produced. I didn't like it for many things. Like I didn't care for the beats. I didn't care for the collaborations. It was full of G units and all that, Obi Trice and all these D12. Like all this, it was bullshit. The thing is, I jumped on this album because during this time, this was 2004. A lot of people was bumping Dipset, G Unit, 50 Cent. Me personally, I was still on my Tupac hype train. I'm doing like I do what I do for like LeBron. I was doing for Tupac back then. I was like, yo, no, Tupac's still the GOAT, you know. And when I heard it, it was just it was embarrassing. I didn't care for it. A lot of the songs were just because they went beyond just putting Tupac vocals to a beat. They would take vocals out. They would make Tupac say things like G Unit and shout out 50 Cent or shout out Obi Trice, and it would just sound weird because it didn't weigh. It wasn't paying respect to Tupac. You were messing with the rumors that he could still be, you know, alive by making them shout out current people that wasn't around during the time that he was here. It was just the ultimate disrespect. People wanted to boycott the album. I couldn't see myself boycotting it because it had Tupac's name on it, but I understood why, because it was just so far removed for what was actually recorded. Even Ghetto Gospel, the song that they got with Elton John, oh my god, Tupac's vocals is like so high pitched, it doesn't even sound like him. A lot of vocals were like missing. A whole verse and a half or so was missing from the original song, and yeah, it did commercially well. Like, you know, I think it was like one of the top hits in the UK. But overall, like, if you know the original song, the quarter song, yeah, sure, it probably wouldn't have charted or anything like that, but it hurt the integrity of the song, and it sounded like garbage. But the original song was just dope, and I love the original song. But this album was just like a poor effort. And it was a stain on the discography, and it kind of, at this time, I was an Eminem fan. I enjoy Eminem, but I really disliked him for this effort here, is because he was like the lead producer in Loyal to the Game, and I was like, never again should they do that. You know what I mean? And the follow-up, I'm gonna say Pac's Life. This came out in 2006, and the thing I didn't like about this one is because it seemed like an attempt to one-up the Biggie Duets album, which came out like a year earlier. Biggie had a duets album. The Biggie Duets go on and on and on, and like, it was that album was okay. It was songs from Ready to Die and Life After Death remixed with current artists, and every song was a duet. I wasn't a fan of the Biggie duets, and because Pac's Life is a Tupac version of the Biggie duets, it should have been called the Tupac duets. It just wasn't really good. A lot of the songs I heard before, it sounded like they were running out of material. You know, after all these unreleased, these new releases of unreleased songs from Tupac, it finally sounded like they ran out of material, because a lot of these songs sounded familiar, like The Untouchable, Don't Go to Sleep. A lot of these songs, like, I would enjoy it in terms of content and what they mean, but the production was dope. I wasn't a fan of the collaborations. I was not a fan of the Chameleonaires. I mean, I respect Crazy Bone. Tupac did a song with like Bone Thugs before, so that's the only one I kind of was like so about. I wasn't a fan of the T.I. and the Shanti, and that was the single, the T.I. and the Shanti collaboration. But it was really kind of the, you know, the last, you know, effort. I still would like to see another Tupac album, but honestly, I didn't care for Pac's Life like that. It's better. It was, the thing is, I appreciate it because it wasn't Loyal to the Game. It was a better effort than what Loyal to the Game was, because Loyal to the Game was just a screw up. It was just an experiment, and it was a disrespectful experiment. Pac's Life was an okay album. I wasn't a fan of all the collaborations. It just didn't sound right. But this is where I sit with my Tupac album tier list from S to F. Yeah, there's one F album thanks to Eminem. Pac's Life, Eyez, the effort, it was a decent effort. They felt like they had to, you know, compete with the Biggie duets, with the Tupac duets, and they both turned out to be like not so good. Tupacalypse Now, it was his debut album, wasn't his greatest album, but for its time, the album didn't age well, but the message does. Tupacalypse Now and Thug Life were good efforts. However, everything from B to S, you know, Are You Still Down, Tupac and the Outlaw, Still I Rise, Until the End of Time, good albums, could have been better. Machiavelli, great album, classic album, but it had some flaws that shouldn't have, you know, made it into a final album. Better Days, probably the greatest album that was released after Tupac's death outside of Machiavelli. I still count Machiavelli as because Tupac had so much hands on deck on that it was ready to go by the time he passed. So and then of course the S tiers are Me Against the World, All Eyes on Me, and obviously Tupac's greatest hits. Let me know your thoughts on my tier list, and I would love to see what you guys say in the comment section. It's KidSmoove, Apples and Oranges. I'm out.